Η Μάρθα Μεντόζα μπορεί να υπερηφανεύεται με ευκολία πως είναι μία από τις δημοσιογράφους που τα ρεπορτάζ της έχουν αλλάξει ζωές. Στην τελευταία της έρευνα αποκάλυψε το παράνομο δίκτυο διακίνησης ανθρώπων που βρίσκεται πίσω από τα θαλασσινά που καταλήγουν στο πιάτο μας. Χάρη στις αποκαλύψεις της, ελευθερώθηκαν 2.000 ψαράδες που ζούσαν ως σκλάβοι. Το ρεπορτάζ αυτό της χάρισε το δεύτερο βραβείο Πούλιτζερ.
We had the name of the boat, the IMO number.
Η Μάρθα Μεντόζα βρέθηκε στην Αθήνα στο πλαίσιο του 7ου Διεθνούς Φόρουμ Δημοσιογραφίας του IMED και μίλησε αποκλειστικά στο Φάσμα για τις εμπειρίες της, τις προκλήσεις για τη δημοσιογραφία στην Αμερική σήμερα και το ρεπορτάζ που παλεύει επί χρόνια να κάνει στην Ελλάδα. Το 2000, σε ηλικία 33 ετών, η Μάρθα Μεντόζα κερδίζει το πρώτο βραβείο Πούλιτζερ, καθώς ως μέλος δημοσιογραφικής ομάδας αποκαλύπτει την άγνωστη ιστορία ενός εγκλήματος πολέμου που είχαν διαπράξει Αμερικανοί στρατιώτες σε ένα χωριό στη Νότια Κορέα το 1950. Η Μάρθα Μεντόζα ετοιμάζει τώρα ένα νέο ντοκιμαντέρ που αποκαλύπτει πώς οι διαδικτυακές απάτες συνδέονται με κυκλώματα εμπορίας ανθρώπων.
You have made a very big story that has also been awarded with Pulitzer Prize about the fishermen, right? Could you tell us more about it? What have you seen and how did you actually find out about the story?
Okay, so for years people knew that men working on fishing boats in Southeast Asia were enslaved. They were trapped on the boats for years, and they knew it because one person would run away from a boat and tell their story. So with colleagues, we set out to document, find people who were enslaved and track their seafood to the west because nothing was being done about it. And, you know, I can tell it to you quickly, but it took a very long time. We did find men who were enslaved on.
How long did it take? It's really interesting to hear.
It took about 2 years to identify the place where we first went to look for them by crowdsourcing men who were running away from boats. But once we identified Benjina, Indonesia, as an island to go to, it cracked wide open, and it was about 4 months from start to finish on this first step of this project, where we found men who were enslaved, and then we tracked their seafood to the United States. And when it reached the United States, we were able to identify Walmart and Cisco and Safeway and large companies that were selling this seafood that was in the supply network. And so it took about 4 months. What we didn't expect, you know, you do a lot of investigative journalism projects. After we published, within a week, Indonesian authorities went to the island and began freeing the men. And on that day, we were reporting, you know, 100 men are going to be freed today, 200 men. And it ended up being 2,000 men were freed from a number of countries, Laos and Cambodia, Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, and they had been trapped for years on boats. It was the end of that piece of reporting, but it was the beginning of many, many more stories that led to many more people being freed, actually.
How did you feel at that time? You are a journalist, you're a mother. How did you feel that you could witness the impact of your job on so many lives?
Well, and I'm working in different time zones. So when I started writing the first stories that these men are being freed, I don't remember it, but it was 5 in the morning and I went and woke up all my children and said, wake up, they're freeing these guys today. I can't believe it. And then I went back to my office and worked on it. And they told me later and I said, I don't think I did that. And they go, no, Mom, you came in and you woke us up. And I'm okay. I look at their faces and I hear their stories, and a lot of these men, and in other situations where I'm covering human trafficking, I do feel perhaps more concern than maybe a journalist should.
Has this research somehow changed either the policy of the restaurants or the behavior of the consumer themselves?
I thought it was going to change consumer behavior, but it didn't particularly. Seafood is very inexpensive if it's coming from Thailand or from Southeast Asia. And I went to a Walmart and I stood there and I said to someone, hey, change your mind about buying that bag of seafood if you knew it came from people who were enslaved? And they were like, well, will this make me sick?
It's not the only story that you have written and actually made and had an impact. You had also a documentary about US migrant children. I was wondering whether you have made a follow-up on this. We're listening about ICE and what is happening in the detention center.
Yeah.
What's happening with migrant children, and are you worried about it?
Yeah, I guess if I was going to share anything with you, it's that this is very personal. It's happening to all of us now with the Immigration and Customs Enforcement wearing masks, no badge, grabbing people on the street. My neighbor was picked up at 4 a.m. We didn't know where he had gone. We didn't know he'd been picked up. His truck was there and he wasn't home. And I called our local jail, I called our hospital. And then finally a week later he called from Mexico. He'd been living there for 30 years next to us. And now he's deported and can never come back to the United States. And we're currently figuring out what to do with his truck. Like, it's very personal. The children are not going to school. For my husband's birthday, we hire a taco truck every year. This year, one person came to run the whole thing because her whole family is hiding.
You have said, truth set us free. But we're actually witnessing the situation in the US and make all of us quite worried. Lawsuits against newspapers, and we've seen TV shows suddenly off the air. Has this new situation somehow affected your work as an investigative journalist?
I mean, there's pressure on the media, and in some very direct and indirect ways it's impacting me. In a very direct way, I'm working on a project with the Associated Press and Frontline. The Associated Press is no longer allowed in the White House. We had to go do some work covering some things with Melania Trump, so I had to fly across the country to do a one-day at the White House because AP is not allowed in. So yes. But in terms of my confidence in reporting, again, I would say yes, because when I try to interview the Justice Department, the FBI, or other federal organizations that are under pressure, the people I'm interviewing now are concerned about losing their jobs.
Can you tell me about your first story? It was about the US actually tormenting people, right? The first story that you got the Pulitzer Prize for.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, so that was about a war crime that took place during the Korean War. So 50 years after this war crime, when US soldiers shot and killed hundreds of South Korean civilians, finally in South Korea people felt they could speak out. And so they told their story, and that story made its way to the AP offices where I was working. And the US government said it didn't happen and that US troops weren't in that area when it happened. And so, again, I can make the long story short, but it took a lot of research to identify which military unit would have been in that village on that date 50 years earlier.
Can you walk me through a bit?
Yeah.
It's really interesting. Can you tell me a bit? It's
Sure.
it's a really interesting story.
Yeah, okay. The South Koreans, on the anniversary of a death, have not a celebration, but an event to mark the anniversary of a death. We don't do this in the United States, but in South Korea, in this incident, hundreds of people had died. And so on that date, there was many bereaved family members, as well as survivors, who would mark the date of the death of their loved ones. And so we knew a date, and we blew up these big maps topo maps of the region, and then we went to the National Archives, and US troops may do all kinds of things at war that they don't write down, but the one thing they do write down is where they are with the map coordinates and what time and day they are there, because they don't want to get lost forever, their unit, and so they send those reports in. And so we took those reports, which unit was where on what day, and we mapped them with thousands of stickers on maps until we could identify which unit had been in this village where this atrocity took place. And then we used the Freedom of Information Act to get a list of who would have been in that unit. And then we began calling them. And on the 29th call, one man said, I said, I'm doing some research about how civilians were treated during the Korean War? And he said, yes, I was there. And I said, well, you know, there's some civilians who say that they were targeted. And he said, yes, it was in a railroad culvert. And I was like, oh, yep. And I said, it was in like early July. And he said, it was July 24, 1950. He knew the date. And I said, how do you know that? And he said, it was my 20th birthday. And we were shooting at women and children and killing them. And so from there, led to more people till we felt like we had enough people who had been there. So we had found documents that said fire on civilians, use discretion with women and children. We had South Korean survivors who had not been believed. Now we had American troops who were like, yes, we were there, we shot them. And that was enough to confirm a big war crime.
Is it easier to dig into a story nowadays, back then, or it's the same?
Some things are easier now. We have these tools, right? I can go on LinkedIn and be like, who used to work at this company, who doesn't work there anymore, and I can call them and find them so easily. We have lots of investigative tools that we didn't have through technology. We have, you know,
Geolocation.
but at the end of the day, the work that gets the stories is still knocking on doors, asking questions, filing Freedom of Information Act requests. That has not gotten any better. It still takes too long. And listening and being curious and being outraged. I think also, you know, all those things still apply.
I love that, being outraged. How does it,
I think
what do you mean?
Well, okay. I have the honor of having the longest unanswered Freedom of Information Act request in the United States, and it is about a Greek terrorism organization.
Greek?
Yes. Yes. I think I requested this before 9/11, like before 2001. I should have written it down.
November 17?
Yes, yes. Yeah, in the U.S. National Archives. When I get them, would you like to work with me? I'll give them to you.
I'm delighted to.
Okay.
I'm gonna find for you the documents here in Greece. That would be amazing.
I guess. I mean, the thing is, after 9/11, everybody's like, some Greek terrorism organization, like they just blew up the World Trade Center. This terrorism, like that's minor. But before 9/11, there was emerging terrorism globally, and it was very, very troubling to see that coming. So if you can look back before then, I do think it's important to see what roles everybody was playing in that.
Do you think, can we agree that that we can somehow witnessing a democratic setback in the West?
Yes, I would agree with you that we are witnessing a democratic setback in the West, and it's very unsettling.
What can we do as journalists?
I think they would not be trying to silence us, sue our companies, take away our funding. None of that would be happening if we didn't have power. You know, they're not doing that to influencers who have a lot of influence, right? But journalists are impactful in a different way. And I think we need to become more influential, online with social media. Learn from that type of outreach and do it ourselves. But yeah, I think we can and do make a difference every single day. Absolutely.
How do you think we can make that kind of difference?
I think that we have to come out from behind our bylines. So I think for a long time, myself certainly, and journalists in general, didn't really want to be transparent. The stuff you were just asking me about, how did I do that investigation? That's interesting, and that's what's needed now for, we always kind of, believe me, I'm a journalist, I have my standards, I found this out. I think the more we can show the videos, link to the documents, link to the entire report, and try to do more outreach, more community building as journalists, which we're not very comfortable with in general, because we're used to, I'm just the storyteller, but I think we have to be more public about who we are and how we do our work to build trust.
Can you tell me, as a last question,
Yeah.
your most powerful moment as a journalist, the moment that actually you still remember, the moment that you keep telling on your children and you share with your grandchildren?
I'm not one for superlatives. So I always feel like my most powerful moment is yet to come, and it's every day. I mean, this morning I woke up and I had WhatsApp messages from somebody who is trapped, being human trafficked, who has shared with me a lot of information. And I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna go eat some eggs and a croissant now. What am I supposed to do about this? This feels very intense. And so to me, it's like, whatever's in front of me is the most exciting and impactful.